Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll receive insight, inspiration, and advice for living your purpose and making an impact as a conscious leader. You'll also hear inspirational stories of other conscious leaders who are living and leading from a place of mission, vision, and purpose. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with me, your host, Jennifer Skor. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome as a guest to the show today, Jeff Harry. He shows individuals and companies how to tap into their true selves to feel their happiest and most fulfilled, all by playing. Jeff has worked with Google, Microsoft, Southwest Airlines, Adobe, the NFL, Amazon, and Facebook, helping their staff to infuse more play into the day-to-day. Wow, I think we could all use some of that, Jeff. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be awesome.
It is. I'm really stoked. I'm really excited. I just love your energy. So, Jeff, tell us what inspired you to do this work. Tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are now from where you were before you discovered your calling.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you the short version, but do you remember the movie Big with Tom Hanks way back in the day?
Yes.
So I saw that movie when I think I was in third grade. And in that movie, Tom Hanks plays with toys for a living. Like, that's his job. And I didn't know that could be a job. So as soon as that happened, I started writing toy companies, like literally in third, fourth, fifth grade. And I just kept writing them. And first they were really short letters, and they became really long letters with, a lot of ideas. But I was constantly asking for a job, and I would constantly get rejection letters back, but I kept writing. And that eventually led to me, going to college and then graduating and working for the toy industry. And, when you get something that you thought you always wanted, and then you finally get there and it's nothing like what you actually envision it to be, that's what happened to me. Like, I was at a toy company. I thought it was going to be my dream job. And instead it was so boring. There was no play. There was no fun. There were no high fives. And it was just like, I had like my quarter life crisis. And I remember I was in New York and I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I bumped into an organization that had only 7 people, and they were teaching kids engineering with Lego. And I joined them, and basically, through play, we built it up into the largest Lego-inspired STEM education company, like in the US. Like, we were teaching 100,000 kids a year. We had 400 staff, or went from 7 to 400 people. And the whole time we figured it out by playing. Like, we had no idea what we were doing. But what was so interesting about that was, like, it worked. And then we would meet all these other companies that were kind of just like making it up as they went along as well. And then I remember, because we were in the Bay Area, we got the attention of a lot of Silicon Valley companies, the Facebooks, the Adobes, the Googles. And they would ask us, like, hey, do you do team building events? And then we'd be like, of course we do, even though we didn't. But we would just say yes to anything, right? And then we would just make it up. And I found that a lot of them talked about creativity and collaboration and connection, right? And even conscious leadership. But they didn't create the safe space to actually achieve any of that. There was no way to be innovative if you couldn't allow someone to play. There was no way to take risks if you weren't able to let go of results. There was no way to show up as a conscious leader if you weren't willing to be empathetic, which play teaches you. So I created Rediscover Your Play just to tackle those issues, using play and positive psychology to do it.
That's so awesome. It's brilliant, actually. And there are so many pieces of wisdom to unpack from what you just shared. A couple of things that really stand out is, one is saying yes. to opportunities, even if it feels scary and it's new and it's something that you're not doing. When we get fixated on only moving forward under the right circumstances, when we get hung up in that perfectionism, that is the killer of dreams. That is like the king or queen, or however you want to refer to it, of missed opportunity.
Yeah, and even exploring perfectionism, what is that, right? That is what adults do. Adults are obsessed with results. And, the saying is like, expectations are the thief of joy. And you could see it during 2020. So many people had a clear vision of what their 2020 was going to be like. It was supposed to be their year. And when that didn't happen, it was just so devastating for so many people. And if there's anything we can learn from play and learn from kids, is they let go of results. Like, I define play as any joyful act where you're fully present in the moment, where you've let go of the results, where there is no purpose, where you've fallen in love with the process. You don't have regrets about the past. You don't have anxiety about the future. You're just fully in the moment. And you see that with kids all the time, and that's why they're able to enjoy life at such a higher, level sometimes than we are, because we're still trying to hold on to that perfection, that one result that we didn't get, and we're missing out on all the other opportunities that are right in front of us if we were able to just let go of that result.
Absolutely. And children, the word tainted keeps coming up for some reason. Probably not the best way to describe it, but it's like, as children, we don't have those filters, right? Of life, living life out in the world. We're fearless.
Right. And if you think about it, if you think about it, we have to understand what happened, right? So when I talk about play a lot, people are like, well, why don't adults play as much? And I always reference 148,000 no's. So according to some studies, by the time you reach the age of 18, you will have heard the word no 148,000 times. And then maybe the word yes, between 8 to 10,000 times, depending on, who raised you, right? Then on top of that, you go to school where you're told to raise your hand all the time and ask for permission, and you're should on all the time by your parents, by your teachers, by any adult, like, you should do this, you should major in that, blah, 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 right? And then you get to your teens where, you have social media where it is constantly telling you, as well as just straight media that's constantly telling you you're not enough, all of that is happening on top of, and that if you think about your ability to just play and allow yourself to be your weird, nerdy, strange self and take a risk, it's such a rebellious act. It's such a revolutionary act, because you are going against everything that you've been programmed to do. And what I love about just the title of your podcast, get awake, is just like awake, wake up from the old story that you're not enough. And once you're able to do that, then you're able to pursue and really truly find your purpose.
I'm so glad you brought up that last part about, waking up and knowing that you're enough, because that's what it all goes back to. Our ability to allow those experiences in goes back to learning how to listen to that inner voice, what you were talking about with all of the shoulds that I'm sure all of us have experienced, right? Those come from the external. And it's interesting because whether you look at this from a spiritual or a scientific perspective, our reality, our physical reality is created based upon what transpires within the spiritual and mental planes. So when you think about it that way, it would make sense, right? That you would want to go within, that you would want to tune into your intuition, to your higher self, or that inner voice, and let it lead the way in terms of the path you're meant to follow.
Absolutely. I mean, we can even break down some of the science behind it, right? Like in positive psychology, they talk a lot about flow. And I equate play synonymous with flow, and flow is when you're in flow because you forget about time. Whatever you're doing at that moment, you are just so fully present in the moment that it just feels like it's fully you. It's Howard Thurman's thing. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes me come alive, because what the world needs is for more people to come alive. And when you're in flow, you come alive, right? So the science behind it is, in your prefrontal cortex, usually your brain is in a beta state, but when it's in a flow state, it actually is going through something referred to as transient hypnofrontality. And that's actually when a part of your prefrontal cortex, which is there to protect you, which is there that has your inner critic, part of that actually shuts down. And when it shuts down, what's fascinating is your implicit mind appears, you become more creative. It actually, when that part shuts down, it actually distorts time. That's why you don't notice time. And then what the other part that shuts down is your inner critic shuts down. And when your inner critic shuts down, all of a sudden you get this wave of dopamine and you become highly curious. And instead of looking for that one result, you see all of the opportunities that are in front of you. And usually what our brain is doing, specifically our lizard brain, the prefrontal cortex part, is trying to protect us, right? They're trying to protect us from all of, these dangers that we had during caveman times. But now we don't need that, but it's still there to protect us. So it has that inner critic that whispers to you all the things from your traumatic past, like the bully that was mean to you in third grade, or the time when you broke up with someone in high school. Like all these traumas come up, and then your inner critic is telling you, like, don't take risks, don't play big, don't show people who you are, right? And if you're able to address that inner critic, play with that inner critic, as I run a workshop just on that, right? You're able to then quiet that inner critic and then hear that inner cheerleader, that inner superhero that is constantly whispering to you, like, you got this, like, you can do this, like, take that risk, create that podcast, make that video, write that person you've been wanting to write forever. Like see just what might happen, and just be open to following that curiosity.
I could talk to you for days. Something I'd love to just open up a little bit more from what you just said is the acknowledgement of our inner critic. So I want to talk about that for a second, because so many people out in the world, and even in the personal development industry, you hear a lot of, think positive. But more often than not, it's not acknowledged that we have to dig into that inner critic. It can also be referred to as shadow work. In order for us to reach the place where we're truly feeling sustainable transformation, we have to go within and acknowledge what's in there and allow it to come forward, to be released.
Yes. I love that. I mean, when I referenced positive psychology, a lot of people equate it to toxic positivity, and that's not what it is, right? Because toxic positivity is delusional. You should not be happy all the time. You should not be always, happy, right? Like positive psychology, what I love about it is it talks about allowing you to feel all of the emotions. You can feel all of the emotions at the same time. Like when my father passed away, His brothers that had not seen each other in 30 years came to the funeral. I was surrounded by family. I was joyful during that time. At first, I felt really guilty. I was like, should I feel joy here? But then I was like, no, wait a minute. I can both feel sadness and joy at the same time. And it's actually a much more, holistic way of living when you're allowing yourself to feel all those emotions, feel anger and motivation at the same time, feel frustration and sadness, like just allow the emotions to flow through you, right? As for the inner critic part, in the workshop that I run, and I can just go through the quick steps that I do that have really helped me, this is what I would challenge your listeners to do. If you have a really loud inner critic, you'll know, because whenever you're feeling bad, your inner critic has been talking to you. You might not have noticed because you thought it was you, but it's your inner critic. So my recommendations is what I do in the workshop is I first tell people, write down what your inner critic is saying right now. Like, what are the things it's saying? Oh, I'm stupid. Oh, I'm always going to be alone. Oh, I should have never started this company. Oh, I'm going to be broke forever. Like, whatever the mean thing that it's saying. So, because it's really important to cast a light on your inner critic, right? So you write all the mean things that it says to you. Then I ask people, what does your inner critic sound like, right? What does your inner critic look like? Let's start to create a persona for it. Because as my friend Marsha Shandor said, when you're able to name that shadow, right? I named mine Gargamel. You are able to then take some of the power away. So Gargamel shows up, and you wonder, where's that voice coming from? Oh, is it Chad from third grade that was bullying you? Or is it like something that happened in high school? Whatever it is, the inner critic is tapping into that trauma, right?
Yeah.
So once you've wrote down the name, wrote down what it said, once you've figured out what it sounds like, what it looks like, and once you've named it, then whenever it shows up, then you can actually acknowledge it. You can be like, thank you, Gargamel. I appreciate what you have to say. But right now I don't need you to drive the bus, so you need to sit in the back seat. And one thing I sometimes do with my friend Dana is when Gargamel shows up, I'll actually text her what Gargamel's saying. I'll be like, Gargamel showed up just now and said all these things to me. And as soon as I text her, or as soon as you send an email to someone else or write it down yourself, you start to look at what it's saying to you. And then you have to ask yourself, like, is that true? Am I going to be broke? Actually, I'm doing fairly well. That doesn't make sense. Am I going to be alone? No, I actually have people that love me. That doesn't make sense. So you start to question, your inner critic. And then you realize like, oh, it's just a voice dealing with trauma from the past.
Yeah.
And the more you get practice to be able to recognize that, after a while, you're able to catch it. And then there's going to be other inner critics, because it's not just one. Usually it's like, it could be 5, it could be 10 different voices. But once you're able to be aware, right? Once you're able to, wake up and recognize that is not your voice now, that is your voice from the past, you are able to then actually quiet it down. You are not going to be able to destroy it, and you shouldn't destroy it because it's there to protect you, but you can become friends with it.
Absolutely. Jeff, what significance do you feel one's clarity of mission, vision, and purpose have in regard to embodying their highest self as a leader?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. Elizabeth Gilbert has talked about this recently of like, you need to, that people, she used to preach all the time that people need to follow their passion. Mm-hmm. And then someone called her out on it and was like, well, what if I don't know what my passion is? Mm-hmm. And she goes, yeah, actually, that's right. And I think that's also a really big challenge when people are like, what's your purpose? What's your calling? And you're like, I don't know. Right. But she recommended, and I really resonate with this, it's just like, well, let's just start small. Right? Let's just follow our curiosity. Let's just follow the thing that makes us feel good. Like when I tell people to play more and they're like, well, how do I do that? I tell them like, get quiet, get calm, because you have to soothe yourself in order to actually play. That's why you have many of your greatest ideas in the shower, right? And if you think about when you're able to get calm and actually get bored like a kid, that's when you come up with some crazy ideas, right? So then once you're able to follow that, then you just follow that curiosity, and then you do the thing that makes you feel good. And then if it doesn't make you feel good anymore, then you do something else. And I think when you're just pursuing things that stoke your creativity and that get you excited, you will begin to find your purpose. You will begin to find what makes you come alive. And then another challenge that I give people when they're like, oh, well, I don't know. And I feel really bad that I don't know, and I should know by now, because everyone's, again, shooting on themselves, right? I tell people to reach out to 3 to 5 of their friends and ask them these 2 questions. What value do I bring to your life? And what I mean by that is like, why are we friends? What do I do for you? Because I think a lot of times we don't know what we do for our friends. So what value do I bring to your life? And then the second question I have them ask their friends is like, when have you seen me most alive? Right? When have you seen me most playful, most present, most joyful? And when you hear that back from 3 to 5 people that are going to give you drastically different perspectives, you then again begin to see like, oh, I'm actually already doing some of the stuff that I want to do. I'm already leading with purpose just by being me, and what I do a lot of times with clients is I'm just helping them get to a point where they get paid to be themselves, because then they can do their best work and just so happen to also get paid for it. So that's how I would answer that question.
I love that. I'd also love to add, an honest self-reflection around what your beliefs and values are can be super helpful as well. And
yes,
can be used as kind of like a North Star too, to kind of point you in
Absolutely.
the direction. And then just to touch on what you said about purpose is so true. It's not, this destination or this one thing. And actually, as our vision or our mission or whatever it is that we're passionate about can actually change over time too, because our souls crave expansion, and we evolve as human beings. So it's really all about the journey.
It is. And I think a lot of times comparison is also the thief of joy. And I also love to mention to people this because, I created or coined a term called affluent deadness. Right. And what I mean by that is like, I know a lot of people that are successful. I know a lot of people that are rich and affluent and have enough money that they can travel the world 10 times over, and they're not happy. Like as much as their Instagram post might say that they're joyful, there's been studies that if you're making between $75,000 a year or $1 million, your happiness levels don't get higher as you make more money once you pass that threshold. And the thing is, the people that are suffering from this affluent deadness are either worried that they're going to lose what they have, or they're comparing themselves to somebody else. Like, I only have 5 million, but someone else has $10 million or whatever number it is, because it's arbitrary. Or they just seem bored because they got to this echelon that they thought everything would be great at that point. And it hasn't brought in them the fulfillment and joy. They might have like spats of happiness that they post on Instagram, but for the most part, they're lying that they're happy or that they're fulfilled and joyful. So we have to be aware and wake up to like, that is the lie, and the challenge that's also really both scary and exciting is like, what brings you joy and fulfillment now? Because whatever you're doing now is going to be what like paves your legacy. And if you talk to any bands or singers, and they're like, well, what was your favorite time in your career? And they were like, you know what it was? It was when I was struggling. It was when I was like driving in a van with my friends and we were just barely getting by. Like, they enjoyed that because they were fully present in that moment. So we have that opportunity every single day. And if we're willing to play enough, we're able to then rediscover who we are.
Absolutely. What advice do you have for other conscious leaders who are feeling called to make a bigger impact with their mission and message? Especially, I just want to, kind of preface that with, especially with the time that we're living in right now, right? I think a lot of people are feeling more of a sense of urgency around making the most of their time here. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think the way I would answer it is I resonate again with the Elizabeth Gilbert quote where she says, personal transformation doesn't happen until you get tired of your own bullshit, your own BS, right? And I remember at one point my BS was I wasn't able to make videos. I didn't have time to make videos. And then COVID hit and it was just like, guess what? You have all the time in the world. What are you going to do now, Jeff?
The universe is like, here you go.
Now I'm like churning out a video a day, right? And it's not that big of a deal. So the challenge I would have for your conscious leaders would be to be like, what is the BS that you've been telling yourself? What has been holding you back and why? And then the other part that I would also challenge to do is I always love to Goodwill Hunt listeners. Do you remember the end of Goodwill Hunting?
Oh yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know, is like Matt Damon's a genius. He's at the end of the movie, he's at a construction site with Ben Affleck, and he tells Ben like, hey, I'm looking forward to like raising my kids at Foley Field and watching them play. And Ben is like, I will kill you if you're here in 20 years. And Matt's like, what are you talking about? What I owe it to myself? And Ben's like, no, you owe it to me. You owe it to everyone else at this construction site that would give anything to have what you have. You're sitting on a winning lottery ticket and you're too scared to cash it in. And for your listeners, each and every one of them is sitting on a winning lottery ticket. So the question is like, what are you going to do with it? You know what it is, or you have a feeling or an inkling of what it is. But what are you going to do? Because frankly, we need you to wake up right now and pursue that, because that is what the world needs. The world needs more people that are coming alive and pursuing who they are. Because right now, the reason why I feel so many of us feel lost is because we're constantly trying to people please and be someone that we are not.
Absolutely. And I love the analogy that you used about, sitting on that winning lottery ticket. It's so true. Out of the billions of us on the planet, each one of us is unique, and each one of us has these unique gifts that we're meant to share, and not everyone may be meant to be on a world stage or whatever, but it's, success and happiness and fulfillment and purpose. It's what it means for each of us.
Right. And I think of that. I love that you said the part of like, you don't have to be the Brene Brown of whatever it is you want to do, right? Because then again, that's us shooting on ourselves that we have to be that, right? And it's more the idea of asking yourself, how do I want to show up today? How do I want to show up in this next hour? How do I want to show up in this next conversation or next Zoom meeting? And just simply be like, what impact can I make at this very moment? And just go from there and see where that takes you, because that's just going to make a much more glorious day. And the other thing that I think of is what my friend Desiree told me like a year ago. She always asks this question of herself whenever she wants to have a good like day, right? Is whenever something great happens, like something small, but brings her happiness, she asks herself, how can it get any better than this? And when you ask yourself, like, how can it get any better than this? It can build, right? Like I ask myself, how can it get any better than this? Ooh, I'm going to be hopping on this podcast with Jennifer. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Ooh, I get to see my girlfriend later. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Right after this call, I'm going to get to brainstorm with my friend Lauren a whole new workshop. How can it get any better than this? And when you're willing to like prime your mind to look for the opportunities, right? The opportunities to play, the opportunities to take risks, then you're able to see the world in a whole different light.
Absolutely. Jeff, how can someone find you if they want to connect with you and learn more about what you're up to?
Absolutely. So they simply can just go to rediscoveryourplay.com, and all they need to do is click on the Let's Play button, where, I have a complimentary conversation with you where we dive into ways in which to help you rediscover who you are through play.
Awesome. Jeff, it was truly a joy having you as a guest. I just loved our conversation, and I can't wait to hear what our listeners think about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Awaken on Purpose podcast. Please visit me and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or at awakenonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can live your purpose and make an impact as a conscious leader, visit me at jenniferspore.com, and while you're there, be sure to join my email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.